Welcome to the How Humans Work podcast. I am your host, Jef Szi, Jeffrey Salaji. So glad to have you here. Season 1 is afoot, and we are kicking it off by exploring not just human nature, but particularly the facet of fathers and fathering, the impact and the influence they have on the lives of my guests. Hold tight, stay tuned, and listen in because we are about to journey into a series of conversations. It is incredible. Let's get into it. Let's get started. Here we go. Welcome to the How Humans Work podcast. I'm Jeffrey Salaji, your host and guide. My guest today is my friend and ally, Jonah Larkin. Jonah Larkin's with Warrior Energy. He's a performance and habit expert. Jonah, welcome to today's podcast.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Too kind. I'm definitely excited to be here and excited to be part of your project.
Yeah, as you know, this project is around fathering and the impact of fathers and our relationships with them. So in a little bit, I do want to talk about your relationship with your father and who he is and who he has been to you in your life and how that relationship shaped you and both as something to move towards and away from. But before that, I just want our listeners to get to know you a little bit. I've had a chance to get to know you over the past 6 years. And we've had both a friendship and a business partnership. At this point in our journey, we're headed our separate ways, which has been, I think, in a lot of ways, really healthy for us. One of the wonderful things about our individuation on our project, which was How Humans Work, formerly known as Evoke, is to see you really start to shine in a way. And I think you've found something really important and useful. And I see you leveraging that through how you're articulating vitality through habit and performance. So tell me a little bit about how you found your way into that domain of focusing on performance and habits.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jeffrey. Great question. And I actually very much agree with you. You know, How Humans Work was quite a journey for both of us. And likewise, I've seen you, take this whole domain around stress intelligence and the intelligence of stress, which nobody else is really talking about in the way that you are, nor to the depth that you are. And so I just want to repeat that appreciation back at you. But to answer your question, it came about a bit intuitively, I would have to say. They say you teach the things that you need to learn. And I truly, truly believe that because I see even, the most famous teachers in the world, the Tony Robbins of the world and all these folks, we look at them and we think that they kind of have their shit together and they don't because none of us really, truly do. Stephen Levine said, if somebody says they don't have any shit, they're probably standing in it. But I came to the habit thing sort of intuitively out of creating a morning routine and realizing how much better I did by waking up and meditating and doing some breath work and drinking some water and setting an intention for the day. And I just realized how big of an impact that started to have on my life. So it just kind of extended from there. I was like, wow, this morning rhythm routine thing is pretty powerful. And, I know I've read about it a lot and all of that, but I never really appreciated the depth of it. And so that's what got me started on the journey was just that kind of intuitive hit of doing it and seeing the effect of it compounding.
And what did you see or what was your experience of the effect of making a morning routine?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, one is just I was waking up and getting focused before I started work. And because of the way my brain works, I have a very creative brain and I'm liable to go off in a million different directions. And so it's very easy for me to get off track. And so just setting my intention and kind of visualizing where I wanted to be that day has been incredibly helpful. The other part of it is giving myself space to feel how I'm feeling. and just like, oh, this is coming up or that's coming up. I mean, as you know, in meditation, like things just pop up that you're like, oh my God, I can't remember. I've forgotten that.
So
right?
When you're doing your morning meditation, then you're not actually doing a strict meditation of trying to silence the mind.
No.
Okay. What is it you're doing? Because I think you're hinting at it.
Again, it's very intuitive, but what I'm doing right now is I have a couple of mantras that I say to get myself very centered. And then I do some basic just energy flow work, bringing in earth energy and bringing in heaven energy. And then I actually visualize. I'm really working with visualization right now and asking for inspiration around what it is that I'm trying to visualize. So instead of me trying to create the visualization in my mind, I'm asking for inspiration to visualize the things that I want to create.
And that's working.
There does seem to be some effect that when I visualize things very clearly, oftentimes I will have the experience of having something happen that's surprising. And so, do I know for sure X equals Y? No, I don't. But I have this suspicion that there's something, it has something to do with that.
You're feeling a relationship there. I know from my side of your life, I'm watching you and I'm actually seeing a different level of productivity, a different level of concentration, and a different level of consistency than I've known you to have before. You know, you do have a very creative mind. You get a lot of awesome ideas. And I think you've been more diligent about that. And I imagine the way you're working with your morning routine is actually helpful.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I can give you an example. I realized, a week ago or so ago, I'm like, I'm a solopreneur. I'm like, I can't do this alone. I cannot do this alone. And so I took the mindset of, I have a team. I have a team. I have a team. My team's getting things ready for me. My team's doing this. My team's doing that. Just kind of fantasizing about it, visualizing, fantasizing. And I was talking with a buddy and he's like, oh yeah, you need to talk to, so-and-so who gets executive assistants from the Philippines and talk to them. I'm like, okay, cool. And so I wouldn't have even mentioned it if I wasn't going through that kind of play practice of, I've got a team, I've got a team, I've got a team.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So in terms of, that's how you've come into the performance and habit experience. You're like, okay, it just started evolving for yourself. It started making sense. And now you've been actually, through a vision you've had, started to move it out into the world. And I had the opportunity to do your 30-day challenge, and it was fantastic. The way you set up the whole program, super engaged, very valuable. I have a morning routine now because of you. I have my own similar way of meditation, which is less focusing on trying to quiet the mind than to recollect my nature and myself and my sense of purpose each day. So I call it more like a purpose meditation. And it's similar, but I would say different than yours. But I give myself a lot of space to presence more than to quiet. Because it's the beginning of the day. It's the outset of the day, and so I'm trying to remember out of my dreams who am I today? Am I the same guy I was yesterday, or 10 years ago, or am I working on something that's I'm going to be in 15 years? I don't know, but I'm trying to figure that out each morning, and it's a beautiful practice. And so I'm grateful for that. But I would love for you to just give the listeners a few high-level principles of, hey, when you're working on your habits, when you're working on your performance, do this, avoid this, watch out for this.
So I just got turned on to what are called first principles thinking. And I know some people are going to kind of like laugh and be like, oh, haha, it's not a new idea. But first principles thinking is basically bringing any concept down to its actual fundamental aspects. And habits are absolutely like that. So here's the way to think about habits. Most of your life is actually run by habits. Up to 90% of your life is habitual. And that's a good thing, because think of how difficult it would be to constantly have to pay attention to brushing your teeth or using your phone or, kissing your wife or anything like that, right? It's like all of these things are habitual, and as a result, habits run your life. And the corollary of that is that you can really look at any result in your life, your body composition, the amount of money you have in your bank account, the quality of your relationships. All those are a result of your just day-to-day small activities that you do over and over and over again. What that means is that habits are extremely powerful. And what it also means is that it's really hard to change them. And it's really hard to change them because they're not conscious. Habits, by definition, are running in the unconscious mind. You don't have to think about brushing your teeth, right? And so as a result, in order to change a habit, you actually have to make it conscious. And so when people talk about, oh, it's so difficult to do good habits, it is if you don't know the rules. And the rules is that you've got to make them conscious, and then you have to repeat them for a number of times until that becomes unconscious again. So I have a simple formula, which is basically the difficulty of the habit you're trying to create. Maybe it's meditation, maybe it's going for a run every day, maybe it's writing, or maybe it's something like having very transparent communication at work, whatever it is. So it's the difficulty of the habit divided by the focus you put into it times the amount of time you repeat the behavior. Mm-hmm. And so that is the magic formula. It's not 21 days or 66 days or anything like that.
It's variable then.
Completely
right?
variable.
You up your intensity of intention and your focus and time. It becomes easier. It's a harder habit. It's more difficult. That makes sense.
Yeah. And then the other part we don't realize is that environment is more important. Environment and company are more important than just about anything else. You go to a bar. What do you do at a bar? You have a drink. You go to the gym. What do you do at the gym? You work out. Those are triggers that are telling you what to do where. So, a lot of people are working from home right now. It can be really difficult to work from home because home is not, by definition, a workplace. It's a home place.
Culture is undergoing a whole new habit formation, right?
Absolutely.
Which is beautiful because there's a whole range of opportunities that come along with that, but there's a whole range of failure.
Yeah.
It's all,
yeah. like the COVID-19 pounds.
Yes. Totally. I was out on the soccer field for the first time a few weeks ago, and I looked around and I could see where all the food on the shelves had gone. It all made sense. Like, okay, there's less on the shelves. Where did it go?
Incredible. Yeah.
So that's really fantastic. And I love your take on it. And I love your sense of, we've talked about this, the way that context, environment, in terms of what we express is absolutely a relationship. People tend to take their health behaviors personally for a lot of reasons. They struggle, they tend to feel bad, but understanding context and situation and company, like you said, is super, super important for a lot of different reasons, but particularly on this area of focus of yours of habit and performance. The one that I like a lot and I think is really helpful is your shift from willpower to identity. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So again, there's this myth that we have, especially I think in American culture, that you can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and you can do it yourself. And you and I both know this. How many patients have we talked to and we're like, you really need to work on changing your diet. And they're like, I know, I just really got to change my diet. And, it's just the way they say it. You're like, ooh, that feels difficult and challenging. And so it's like, people think that they can depend on willpower to make things happen. And that's a really, really poor strategy. It's a difficult strategy and it's bound to fail. And the difference between high performers and people who fail at that stuff is that high performers use easy strategies to get things to do stuff. And so the identity piece comes in terms of who you think you are and what you do when you do that thing. So you are a soccer player. You know, Jeffrey's a good soccer player. He's a great forward. And we played on the same
I said we were going to be truthful here.
Okay, for over 40
all right.
guys.
Yeah, not bad.
For over
not bad.
40, you're a pretty good forward.
And for somebody who didn't play for 29 years between the age of 10 and 38 or something like that, that's not too bad. Yeah,
that's actually amazing.
It's not too bad.
You think of yourself as a soccer player, and so you play soccer. But here's where it gets interesting, is you can actually adopt an alter ego. Mm-hmm. And this is where the power is, because it's so difficult to change who you are. And do you really want to change who you are? You know, you are who you are. You know, I like to tell the story of Beyonce, the singer. And when she was a teenager, she was getting up on stage and she was very embarrassed about getting out and singing and shaking her booty and doing all that stuff. And she needed to do it in order to succeed. And so she found an alter ego for herself, which she named Sasha Fierce. And Sasha Fierce was a badass. Sasha Fierce would go out on that stage and just crush it and shake her butt and sing like there was no tomorrow. And she had that alter ego, I think, for 15 or 20 years. And then she came out with an album called I Am Sasha Fierce.
So powerful.
Yeah, super powerful. And then after that, she gave it up because she said, I no longer need the alter ego. Sasha Fierce is now inside of me.
Amazing.
And so we can do this by
so alchemical. It's so alchemical in terms of like taking iron and becoming gold. It's beautiful. Yeah,
truly. It really is. I love that you say that. It is alchemical. And so we can do the same thing with, you know, what I recommend is finding a hero. You know, for me, it's Nelson Mandela is a great hero of mine.
Tell me why.
And, you know, he's got this quote that says, you know, it says, don't admire me for all the successes I've had. Admire me for all the times I've been knocked down and gotten back up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I went to his prison cell in South Africa on Robben Island.
Did you?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was amazing. I mean, I'm full of goosebumps right now, just thinking about it. He is heroic at that level. But one of the more humbling parts of that experience was going on the bus on the island after getting off the ferry on the tour and sitting a row behind some elderly Black South Africans, and to be in their presence and know that this was, you know, apartheid was their living history, you know, and to be sitting next to them who had lived through what they lived through as a culture, particularly on the Black side of the story, was one of the 2-3 most humbling experiences I've had in my life. But being in his prison, knowing he shadow boxed, knowing that they went out to the work where they did the sandy digging, and they would pretend to go into the bathrooms, into the little caves they had because they were out of sight of the guards, and they would go in there and they would do momentary mentoring. They had all the different factions of anti-apartheid resistance, and they put them all on Robben Island. So they started exchanging knowledge and working with each other and building each other up, and these little micro moments of teaching.
Fascinating.
Isn't that powerful?
Super powerful. Yeah.
Thanks for that really beautiful stuff. And for people who are looking for working with morning rhythm routines, habit change, coaching, I would definitely send you Jonah Larkin's way. You can find him at warrior.energy. But I want to actually go from hero to father. And tell me a little bit about where you grew up.
So I grew up in Mendocino, in a little place, Middlebridge, up Albion Ridge in Mendocino County, coastal, rural. You know, when I grew up, it was kind of a mix of intellectual hippie transplants, which I would consider my parents would fall under that label. fishermen, loggers, which I would say, if we're going to classify people, would kind of be under the redneck type of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a derogatory word.
I think I don't know. It probably is, but I think what you're pointing at is there was people who worked in the resource, laborers around natural resources.
Yeah. There was always quite a bit of like interesting, both conflict and mixing of those cultures, between the hippies, the rednecks, the pot growers,
right.
And all of that. So yeah, I grew up there, and it was Mendocino is a very different kind of rural town than many other places, because there were so many intellectuals who went up there. And so it was extremely progressive. And
so there's a pretty wide spectrum.
Not diverse, though.
Right. But intellectual, kind of open-minded, closed-minded, conservative, liberal, progressive, regressive, spectrum.
Yeah, all mixed together.
But all white. What about Latin folks? When you were growing up?
There's definitely some Latinos. I mean, there are definitely Latinos. There were guys, there was like several Latinos on my soccer team. Mm-hmm. And, we had, a smattering of other ethnicities, but, mostly white dominant culture type of stuff.
So your father, he was a transplant, somewhat intellectual, progressive. Where did he come from?
Both my parents came from LA.
Do you know what year he was born and what part of LA?
Yeah. My dad was born in 1943, and my mom was born in 44. So basically the brief history of my dad is grew up west side of LA, went to college in Southern California, was in the Peace Corps in Panama. That's where my parents got married. Went to New York, worked in the drug rehabilitation services division in New York City when he was a young guy, then moved to Mendocino. He and my mom moved to Mendocino because they wanted to get out of New York City. So yeah, that's kind of his brief history there.
That's good to hear those details. Did they move there before, like to start a family and go country or rural?
Yeah, they moved there to start a family. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They were wanting to just not raise a kid. My dad's like, I did not want to raise a kid in New York City. And which is, talk about values, right? It's like, I am so glad that he had that value. It just touches my heart, because I actually believe that the reason I have a very calm nervous system, I believe that is because of two things. It's because my mom has a pretty calm nervous system. Mm-hmm. And so obviously I was inside her for 9 months, but the fact that I grew up in nature, I think that there's nothing, I don't believe that there's a substitute necessarily for that. I think being in nature calms your nervous system. It just provides a baseline. And so I'm deeply grateful
beautiful.
To my dad's sensibility.
You're speaking to one of the intuitions I've had about in knowing you, is that you remind me of this kind of famous picture of a boy standing in the sunset with his face painted like the sunset. Did you ever see that card?
I don't think so.
And you also remind me of this collage I once made, and there was this young, just bright young person. But when you talk about your calm nervous system and your childhood, I've always had this like more interior narrative around, I sometimes glimpse in relationship to you, is this good-natured youth. I can kind of, I can see it and I can feel it at times. And when you talk about it, I'm like, oh, actually it's true. It's like, it wasn't just like a projection of me. It was a perception, or somewhere in the middle. But tell me a little bit about that childhood, that calm nervous system, the ocean, the redwoods, Give us a little hint of that in a story or a moment or a feeling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll give a story of my dad. God, I was young, maybe 5 or something. My dad wakes me up in the middle of the night and he's like, "Hey man, come on. We got to go out and watch the meteor shower." I'm like, "What?" So he takes me out and there's this big field out in front of our house, and we get in sleeping bags and we watch a meteor shower. And I'm getting emotional. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah. So yeah, we watch a meteor shower and I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
The rest of my life, I'll never forget that. And so,
tell me a little bit about the feeling in the moment.
Yeah. There's just a gratitude. And then there's also a feeling of like, my dad's 77 now, and like a feeling of like time passing. He won't be around at some point. Don't know when that's going to be, but just feeling that emotionality of like moments where I was touched, and then acknowledging that to somebody else, I think is powerful.
I feel you. And thank you. I'm curious about the moment of touching there. Like, can you tune in or hone in to what it was like to have your dad rouse you and show you something so magical? And were you feeling love? Were you feeling like, God, inspired? Or were you just awe? Like, do you have a sense of?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, because I think there were times that, my dad really succeeded at fathering. And I would say that's definitely, there's a certain character he had in terms of like showing me things, especially things around the natural world and appreciation for that. So I think that really what that, when I think about it, it was like being kind of shocked in a way, like being woken up in the middle of the night, like shocked. And then to be brought somewhere and like being shown the magic of the universe, like having never seen that before, having it be just something completely new.
Not even on the radar. Not even on the radar.
Like, whoa.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And it was just like, great and inspiring and like, a feeling of real safety, right? Being there with my dad.
Absolutely.
At that time, my father was my hero. Absolutely. He was the idealized man.
Yeah. He found you and brought you into the world, right? I heard you say that, like his character was good at, as you knew him, to be bringing you and exposing you to the magic of nature. And what else, how else did he find you or pull you or reveal himself or show or see you?
He had a great amount of trust for me as I felt like extremely competent. Even at 4 years old, I felt extremely like I could handle myself, and not from a point of like having to handle myself, but from a point of being entrusted. And the talisman of that was my dad gave me a pocket knife, and I don't know how old I was. I mean, I couldn't have been more than 5 years old. My dad gave me a bone-handled pocket knife. And man, to get a knife at that age, wow. And he showed me, always cut away from yourself. Always cut away from yourself. And of course, you have to mess that up at least once.
Did you oblige in that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So go.
Yeah. So, I mean, I that is the talisman, but I was allowed to go out and like cross the road and go to my friend's house and, ride my bike. And it felt very unsupervised.
I mean, that's part of the context of Mendocino versus New York, right?
Right.
There's a lot of context and permission there, but what a blessing to get that at such a young age in such an affirmative way. Did that stick? That sense of that relationship where he trusted you and he believed in you? Yes
and no. Part of it has stuck. part of it, there's a thread of that that's still alive. And, of course, a lifetime of being with my father, has offered the chance for all the other stuff to come up. Of me being very disappointed in him as a man, as, me wanting to be seen by him in a different way than he saw me. Of rebelling against him, of realizing the conditioning that I have from him. As we get older, we start to realize, holy shit, that sounds exactly like my dad. Holy crap.
Right.
And so it's like the tension of like realizing that and not wanting that, but not being able to do anything about it, and like trying to figure that one out.
That's a tough one.
It's a super tough one. Yeah.
I partly hear you kind of going from the heroic to recognizing his condition and his limitations, and like, wait, I'm being brought up in limitations that don't totally match my nature and my soul. And I need to, individuate, push against. So when did he let you down? And when did he lose sight of that part of you that needed to emerge? Like, how did you make it through that, if at all?
I think he let me down. I mean, I have a bunch of different ways that he let me down, and, a bunch of different stories about it. And one is his sort of dominance over me. I remember when I was 16 years old, I think, and I just gotten back I was an exchange student in the Netherlands when I was a junior in high school. Maybe I was 17. I can't really remember, but I remember one time my dad kind of laying the hammer down on me and being like, I don't want you going out and doing X, Y, and Z with your friends, or drinking or smoking weed or hanging out with girls. I can't remember what it was exactly, but it just felt way out of place. It felt like something that might have been appropriate at like 13, but like at 17 or 16 or even 15, it didn't feel appropriate, especially because I'd been used to being entrusted my whole life. And so it was like this reversal where I was like, what the fuck is going on here? It didn't make sense. And I didn't know how to I didn't know how to confront him because I was scared of him. I was just like scared of his strength and all that.
He's a stout guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And and intellectually intimidating and extremely opinionated and like difficult to talk to. Kind of a stubbornness. And I mean, part of the way that I speak is in his tonality and in his assuredness. And so to anyone listening, the assuredness that I speak with is actually not the assuredness that I feel inside. That is a conditioned response in many ways, I believe.
Oh, that's honest.
But I'm able to channel it so that when I'm speaking, I do actually believe it. But when I sit down and open up, it's not the same.
There's kind of dilemma there.
Yeah, I'll say.
maybe even a complex.
I'm trying. I've been really trying to speak in a more honest way from the heart.
Yeah. As
opposed to speak from the mind. And that habit, I don't know if that'll ever go away for me, but it's something that I strive to do.
Yeah, I think that's a very sincere human quest to be wholehearted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's good learning. So we haven't even said your father's name.
Yeah, Steve.
Great.
Stephen Merritt Larkin.
1943.
43. Yep.
LA. Okay, cool. So, so you were born in 72. So he's 29 when you're born.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when he was unable to find you in the way you needed to be found, where did you go?
Well, I mean, I looked for other mentors in terms of I look towards my coaches, most of whom didn't really fill that role. I look to teachers. I really only had one teacher who kind of fulfilled that role. Dan Bull, Mr. Bull. We weren't even allowed to call him by his first name. And he challenged me intellectually like I'd never been challenged. And
high school, college?
No, this was actually middle school. It was late middle school.
Impressive.
And he really like saw me and pushed me for my best. And occasionally I did rise to my best, and he acknowledged it. And occasionally I did not rise to my best, and he acknowledged that too.
So I really want to stop there, because I think that's such a great moment of clarity around essentially performance and capacity.
Yeah.
That there is a difference, that there is a toggle switch, and there is an impact and difference depending on what you're expressing. How long were you with Mr. Bull, you said?
I think I took a year's worth of classes with him.
Yes.
He taught electives. He didn't have a teaching credential. And in fact, the school got rid of him because he was too popular.
Oh my God.
It was, your typical grossness.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I do want to just focus on that moment. So you had, as a young man, the start to see that there's other men who can mirror you, challenge you, bring you into your own capacity and knowledge. Were there other men that you started to seek and find, or was it?
Yeah, well, the other person was my mom's boyfriend, Joel Beek, who was just is a really beautiful man. And he treated me like an adult at 12 years old, and never talked down to me. It was always as equals. And so that was incredibly healing for me. And I just had a great amount of respect for Joel. And he showed me a whole different way of, because my dad was like a macho man, kind of, in many ways, even though it's kind of funny because my dad's actually trans in a certain way. So I don't really have time to get into that now, but Joel was a much different kind of man. He was much more kind of, I'd say, intellectually curious about me, and really challenged me in my beliefs. And like, really, why do you think that? And would engage with me on really deep levels.
As opposed to dominating you, intellectually,
telling me how it is, telling me stories.
Yeah, so he was a bit of an antidote.
Yes,
cool.
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. I want to start getting a little bit out of the youth, middle school, high school, and start getting into who you've become as a man. You've had, a good 25, 30 years of your adult presence in the world. What else is in there in terms of how the need for fathering, your relationship with your father, or your own way of fathering, even though you don't have children at this time? How is that unfolded for you?
I think that in many ways, if I'm completely honest, that I'm still looking for fathering in many ways. And that I wish I could say, oh yeah, that part of my life is done. But I think there's a part of, and I'll just speak for myself, there's a part of me that wants to be fathered and wants to be mothered. I think the more I accept that about myself, the more secure I am in fathering myself and mothering myself. But, that journey has been a tough one, because I was involved with a spiritual guru for a while, which was I wouldn't consider that a real healthy type of relationship. I more gave away most of my power, and that was part of my learning. My journey has really been to get in touch with my own strength as a man. And, I kind of adopted some of my dad's, somewhat kind of like macho stuff, but really I'm pretty soft. I'm pretty gentle and I'm pretty soft. And so, despite the fact that like I have, big muscles and, I like to surf big waves and, do athletic stuff that some people might consider a little bit out of the ordinary. I'm a very gentle soul, and so it's like this, me wanting to be strong and hard on one hand, and yet having to confront my own, having to just like be with my own sensitivity as well. And there's a way in which, from a fathering perspective, I want to be seen for my sensitivity, but I don't want that to, I don't want to be like, I don't want to be mothered in that way, right? I actually want to be fathered. And so that experience with Dan Bull when I was much younger, Mr. Bull was like, no, you actually have more in you than this. And so there's this kind of constant, I think, searching for that sort of, that thread of like, what else do I have inside me that I don't even see? What talent do I have that I haven't expressed? What gift do I have that I can really bring out into the world? And so I think that kind of encompasses really my search for like the nurturer / challenger of the father figure.
Wow, that's very personal. It's very honest. Thank you. I don't want to try and box that up. I think it just stands on its own. But I really do hear your heart. I really do hear your, maybe that you might say toxic or the inferior or less conscious forms of the search. I've had them still finding them in my own life. Like where am I coming from? And I think it's beautiful to own that the hunger or the desire is there. And at one level, I reflect on it and I hear the imprints of how profound they are. So we want them to carry on, like they want that Mr. Bull or those moments where they do show up and it's like, yeah, can life be like that more? And I'm still thirsty for that. I need another swig off that. It's not actually the kombucha I'm looking for. It's it's actually that is the drink, the elixir that I want. And so I really hear that, and I hear the journey of trying to own that particular piece, and I can't help but think that some of that has to do with male societies and ancestral hunter-gatherer expectations that I think at some level emotionally we still have. Tribe. If we were tribe, Mr. Bull would have been there a lot longer than 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the balance in the masculine and feminine would be probably different.
Yeah.
Or there'd be more range of models. So, I hear a little bit of modern context in the still seeking or the still desire for that particular flavor of experience. I just did my first episode interview, and I interviewed a man who I've known for 28 years. He's known me for 28 years since I was 20. I had the best time hanging out with him. We have so much generational parallels, love of food. We're both pigs in the Chinese zodiac. We both have a child's like playful heart, like love kids. He was a kindergarten teacher. I'm like, give me 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds. I'll just chill with them all day. Like in the back alley, like all the parents are watching me. I'm the monster going around, so we have all these parallels, but the beautiful thing that happened was we went to the Redwoods, and he wanted to see the Redwoods. He's about to move to the East Coast, South Carolina. And when we went there, I remembered being 20, and I remembered what it felt like to be purely growing. And he gave me back that understanding of when I went on my first men's retreat in Mendocino in Philo in 1992, the weekend of the Rodney King response riots, aka uprising. And I have to say, I've been nourished all week. I've been feeling like, you know what? I'm not so bad. I know I actually the choices I made have been good choices. And so he sees me. he sees me in a way, and he saw me in a way, and I was able to see my 20-year-old self again and realize, like, oh yeah, 28 years on, I'm still that guy. As much as I struggle with my, parenting, partner, work-life developmental stuff, I didn't really like go, yeah, I need my fathering energy, but there it was. There it happened. We spent 24 hours together or less, and boom, it's all flowering, and I'm all like, I'm happy as a clam. I haven't had a week this good since COVID started. So I feel you.
Great.
I feel you.
That's freaking that's so beautiful, man. That is so dope.
Thanks, bro. So to illustrate the point and to empathize and to validate the desire. And so you're still getting a little bit of it from your dad, little presence, a little non-domination challenge nurturance?
It's interesting. Our relationship has grown a lot over the last 10 years. I'm at the point now where I do just appreciate him for who he is. My desires of being seen by him in certain ways, it's just not as important as it used to be. And, it's funny. And then he'll see me in a certain way and he'll say something very touching. And then other times, he won't. Other times he won't. And I'm like, hey, aren't you supposed to say the thing now?
Oh my God.
Yeah. So say the thing, dude. Same thing. I think part of the thing is releasing the father from the individual personal expectation that my father has to be the answer to all my understanding of manhood or exposure to the world. I don't think I fully let it go until my dad died in 2003. Right. Wow. So, once it was then, I was like, okay, this is done. I don't go to dad and say, hey, you need to, or why didn't you? It's like, okay, you had your life, it's complete. And so the struggle ended for me, but I do hear you starting to work towards it. I hear you starting to actually mature at a place in your own sense of life that the transmission of father, you kind of understand. Yeah.
And you can work with, and then you can also hold it as still a possibility without as much of the complex getting engaged in a way that you don't have control over. Yeah,
I would agree with that. I mean, it was recently my dad's birthday in March, or actually, sorry, it was a letter I wrote him for Father's Day, and I just was like, here's why I appreciate you, and I just kind of went down the list, and it was very much from the heart. It was just like, really not holding back. So that was absolutely great to just write that stuff down. It was just like, I was like, here's why I appreciate you. I appreciate your values. I appreciate what you showed me through your actions, through your actions. It was actually outside of our own personal relationship. It was like watching him in the world. And like, despite what I judge to be all his fuck ups, the way that he has conducted himself my dad's an artist, and he's made beautiful art. He's a ceramicist, made beautiful art his entire life, in search of beauty, basically. He's been a volleyball coach, years, and he's like 77 and he's still applying for college volleyball coach jobs, And I'm like, that's fucking great, man. Like, he doesn't get any of them anymore, but he's still like out there. He's still got the juice for it, which is like great. He's not like settling down. And I appreciate that about him so much. And so, the way that he's really like worked to like touch people and bring people up and do all that stuff. And, he's a very innovative thinker. I got a bunch of my innovative thinking from him, and he's always coming up with these crazy ideas that are like great ideas that he'll never execute because we both suffer from that one. Just watching him like really be kind-hearted and bring people up and coach and like just do it really, really well. And the way that he thinks, it still impresses me, even now. And so that's been a great gift for me to watch him conduct himself in that way. it's also allowed us to just be much more honest with each other. So,
yeah. I mean, that's one thing I've always admired about you is you're not as threatened by real conversations. And I think that's because I think you have less trauma, physical, emotional trauma in your history than I do, which makes it exciting, makes it intense and powerful, but it's harder for me at times. So I've always admired that about your capacity just to talk about things and communicate. But I want to return back to Jonah. I want to come back to you. And that was a great to know about that part of your life, how you experienced your dad, how you saw him, things that work, the things that are working now, and how you've evolved, matured, developed, adjusted. I just want to come back to you, and I want to come back a little bit to your life now, how you see your direction, how you feel about your own form of masculine giving in the world, and just lay the hope, the beauty, the questions.
Well, for a long time, I was very much focused on being a stud, like being as studly as I could, trying to surf the biggest waves and, find the hottest women and, my own way, whatever way that is, and compare myself with my friends in business and all that stuff. And I've succeeded to a certain amount and also failed. I've succeeded at all those things and also failed at all those things. And so I feel like, as far as my own masculinity goes, that I know I can hold any space when need be. Mm-hmm. I may not be able to hold every space, but I can hold any space when it needs to be held. So there's a lot of inner trust and power in that, to know that when the chips are down and things show up in weird ways or challenging ways or difficult ways or, scary ways, that I've got it. And that's actually been kind of a surprise, honestly, to find that out about myself. It's even my girlfriend's like, wow, you're really good in really high pressure situations. It's like I get calm. When things go haywire, I get calm. And so, that has nothing to do with anything about me. It just happens to be the way I'm wired. And so I'm just extremely thankful for that. And I'm secure in that. And that feels very strong. When I really feel into that, I just feel very capable. And then in other ways, I feel totally incompetent.
We don't have to focus on that yet.
Yeah.
Let's go back, because I'm just loving the story, and I'm just feeling almost like at a symbolic, energetic, archetypal level, the energy of your formation in Mendocino and the gift of the bone knife. There's that. Those transmissions are fully being embodied by you right now. And that's a very important installation. I don't think, I think it is rarer than we would want for the confidence and the values and the upbringing of the fathering and the family to translate. And not that you didn't have and haven't done work and won't continue to do work or have, struggle parts, but gets back to this core science research. It's the foods we don't eat, not the foods that we shouldn't eat and do, but the ones we should and don't are the ones that are the most damaging to our health. Everybody's focused on the foods I should avoid rather than the things we get. And you got a certain nutrition, as I understand it in your story, that's really just beautiful to witness.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Yeah. I appreciate the conversation with you, because I knew the pocket knives were important. I mean, I knew that. And I even knew it consciously, because my dad actually gave me a pocket knife when I graduated from college. And so it's been a theme. And even yesterday or the day before, I was cleaning off one of my knives. And, I have several knives. And I was like, I don't get rid of my knives. I'm about to move and I'm thinking about stuff I'm going to get rid of. I'm like, not getting rid of my knives. So it's actually having to name it. like really brought the significance into consciousness right in front of me. So yeah, beautiful. It really, really beautiful. Yeah. And I think the other thing is that there's, this realization of, and maybe it's because of my age or what have you, I'm 48. There's this realization of death. And nobody really, really close to me has died. My grandma, but both my parents are still alive, and none of my really close friends have passed away. I mean, I do obviously have friends who've died and stuff like that, but there's this, like, I pulled a surfer out of the water a year or two ago, and gave him CPR, and he died. And it was like a very close touch with death. And this realization of just like, oh yeah, death, it's coming for us. And it already is here. It's not even coming for us. It's just here. It's one of these things that's part of life. And so there's this sense I have that everything's totally okay, no matter what. Mm-hmm. The world can be going to hell in a handbasket, and climate change and all those things that are like totally breaking my heart in many ways, because I just can't stand to see the earth like be degraded like it is. There's this sense like, oh, it's okay. Like all the drama, everything else, like death is coming for all of us. And that it's like the great equalizer, freer thing. And I know that. And it's like, it makes me want to be ready for it when it comes. I'm sure I'll be scared like anybody else, but I want to be ready. I want to be like ready to face it 100%, face into it, and not try to turn away of like, oh no, this isn't happening, of just fully letting go into it. And, I've had enough letting go processes that I know that letting go is really, it can be quite difficult and challenging to let go. Like even when you want to, it can be really hard. And there's a process around that. I think having that relationship, like death has become much closer to me in many ways. And I feel, I don't feel so scared of it. I don't feel terrified of it. I feel like, okay, yeah, I'm going to try my best. And at some point, this journey is going to be done. And I want to face into that full on. That's kind of the circle of it, I think.
Well, that's beautiful. I'm moved. It's good to listen to you. I think we'll leave it there. Not much to say after that one. So.
Yeah, right.
and I think actually it's a good place to settle the conversation. But I do know, there is going to be quite a number of years looking at your vitality, unless some strange misfortune happens, that, you'll be there doing your work and given the gift of habit change, performance, living in Morro Bay, making the journey, riding the waves, still being ripped in late 40s. And,
I'm going to try to hold on to that one as long as I can, man.
So I love you. I bless you. Thank you for being my guest today. Yeah, blessings on your journey.
Yeah, it truly is a privilege, Jeffrey, to be interviewed by you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Please follow us on your favorite streaming platform and share our podcast with your community and friends. All music is composed by the incredible Chase Jackson at chasejacksonmusic.com. To learn more about this show, our guest, as well as Jeffrey and his work helping people find peace with their human nature, go to howhumanswork.us. Until next time.